This is your 28 Storms Friday evening update. Today we'll be focusing on Invest 96L, which is currently located near Hispaniola. Here is the latest National Hurricane Center 5-day probability of genesis, and it shows Invest 96L having a 90% probability of formation within the next 5 days and 80% within the next 48 hours. And the NHC has noted that tropical storm warnings would be needed for parts of the Bahamas or Hispaniola if indeed an upgrade does happen. Air Force hurricane hunters did investigate the system earlier today and did find tropical storm force winds. However, the surface circulation was still poorly defined. And taking a look at the big picture now, we can see Invest 96L located here near Hispaniola, between Hispaniola and Puerto Rico, and it has actually become better organized today with more thunderstorm activity located near the center of circulation. And the important feature I want to point out is this trough that's diving down. You can barely see it on the edge of the picture in the northern part of the frame, that's diving down and is actually going to be pulling off slowly towards the northeast over the next couple days. And what exactly happens to this trough and how it interacts with Invest 96L is going to be crucial to the ultimate path that this potential storm takes. You're probably wondering, why the sudden attention for Invest 96L? I thought all the models were taking it out to sea. Well, here are the models from earlier this morning. You could see that the majority of them were in fact actually taking it out to sea, with the exception of, I believe, the Canadian and UK Met, which have been pretty consistently showing a slightly more westward track. However, the models for this evening have come in quite differently. You can see that, wow, now there's quite a shift farther towards the west, and we have a pretty significant split in the model guidance. You're probably wondering why the sudden shift in model tracks. This is, I believe, the second time that we've seen a significant shift in the models in the past couple days. Well, for one, we don't have a well-defined center yet for the models to focus on. Secondly, we're dealing with a very complicated steering flow pattern, which is going to evolve pretty quickly over the next 48, 72, and even 96 hours that I'm showing here in this display. This is the deep layer steering from the GFS model for Monday afternoon time frame, when the storm or potential storm would be located in the Bahamas region around here. And you can see that to the north we have a trough, which I talked about before, and then to the east and to the northwest we have ridges of high pressure. And so this is often referred to as a saddle point or call scenario, where the storm is kind of caught between all these features in a weak steering region. And the exact location can be pretty crucial in determining exactly where the storm ends up. A little farther north, and it gets picked up by the trough and goes out to the sea. A little too far to the south, and the trough may move on without it, and it'll be left behind under building ridging to the northwest. Taking a look at the GFS model run, this is from the 12Z run from earlier this morning. And starting off, you can see it initializes with our invest near Puerto Rico. And I'd also like to point out this is the 500 millibar chart, so it gives us an idea of the upper level flow and steering, which is going to ultimately dictate the path that potential Cristobal takes. And as we get into the 30-hour time period, you can see slow movement now more towards the northwest in the Bahamas, and that trough continuing to dig down and weaken the ridging, and that there we have our saddle point like we mentioned before. So let's see what happens. It kind of just meanders around for the next day or so, and the trough remains in place and even amplifies a little bit. And as we move into the 3 to 4 day time frame, you can see the trough beginning to absorb. You see this X right here, that's what would be Cristobal. And 4 or 5 day time period, you can see it getting quickly lifted out to sea. Now if we take a look at the latest 18Z GFS, we see that our area of interest is located once again near Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. And if we put it into motion, can now see a slightly farther south track. Not much, but it is a little bit farther south from what we saw in the 12Z GFS. If you look at the large scale features and that trough once again, you can see it's pretty much identical. This really hasn't changed much in the model runs over the past couple days. and is pretty similar to what the European is also showing in terms of the large scale pattern. If we move it forward now, about 3 days time period, you can see the trough is beginning to pull out, but the storm is being left behind farther towards the west and south in the Bahamas. And now the 96-hour time frame. And by the 120-hour time frame, the trough is pretty much entirely lifted out. Our potential storm is left behind and is actually now impacting southern Florida. So you can see here we have pretty drastically different scenarios offered by this one particular model just over the past 2 runs. And it's not really attributed to the large scale pattern changing. It's more so where exactly is the storm going to be in the next 48 to 72 hours? Where's all the energy going to focus? And where are we going to have our center of circulation and low level circulation actually forming? I think, in my opinion, that's going to be crucial in determining where the storm ultimately ends up. We're talking a matter of only 100 to 200 miles, potentially making all the difference of whether it gets lifted out to sea or is left behind. This final graphic shows the potential scenarios. The first scenario being what we're seeing in some of the more recent model runs, with the track towards South Florida, the storm being missed by the trough, pulling out towards the northeast, ridging, building into the northwest, and driving the storm more towards the west into South Florida and possibly even into the Gulf of Mexico. The other scenario, which I'd also like to mention, the European is still on board with, is a track that's a little bit more towards the north, eventually picked up by the trough and lifted out to the northeast out to sea. There's also the potential for a more middle ground track where it tracks a little bit farther north but not quite as far and is left behind in very weak steering and somewhat just meanders around for a few days before eventually being lifted out by a second trough, which will move across the central and even eastern United States in the next 5 to 6 days, and that would have potential impacts on the East Coast. As always, we'll continue to keep you updated here at 28 Storms. Things remain very uncertain at this time regarding the future of Invest 96L. However, we're hopeful that in the next 24 to 48 hours, once we do have a potentially developed storm, things will become much more clear. So once again, stay tuned and thanks for watching.